I'm not sure if it's Ekua or Shelley still has their audio on. Can you just click your audio off for me, just for now? And I'd like to welcome everybody. It's Sharon Avery. Welcome to the room this morning. We're going to get started right at 8 o'clock. I know we have about 227 folks registered for the Better Toronto Coalition call this morning. Thank you for getting up bright and early with us. And we have a great lineup of speakers, and we're really excited to have you. So we'll get started right at 8 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. It's Sharon Avery, and I can see more and more people joining the room this morning. Don't forget your chat function down the side. Lots of folks are wishing good mornings, and it is such a great way to start your day, mingling with a few hundred neighbors. And we have a great lineup this morning. We're going to get started in just about a minute. I can see folks from organizations introducing themselves. Please feel free to do that. We'd love everyone that's on the call to know who else that's leading the charge at the front lines on this crisis is here. We've just passed the 100 mark in the room, and I know we've got about 227 folks registered. So I think we'll get started because we have a lot of content to cover. And I know we'll have folks arriving over the next little while. I encourage you to do two things. Use the chat function. It's really a helpful way to connect with folks that you can't see, because you're only going to really hear from a few of us this morning. But there are lots of fantastic organizations who are joining us as well. About half the audience represents organizations on the front lines of this crisis. And I think please feel free to connect with them directly through chat. And I also believe the poll has been opened we always like to find out who's with us today. And so in the left-hand toolbar, you see polls. If you could take a minute to fill in the poll and let us know what part of the world you represent, whether you're a caring Torontonian or an org leader, corporate partner. We just take 2 seconds to fill out that poll while we get started. So thanks everyone for joining us here at our third Better Toronto Coalition webinar. This rapidly changing world, a lot of announcements coming out of the City of Toronto yesterday, and the Mayor's office really continuing to push social distancing and adding stronger and stronger language to that. Lots of government announcements getting clarified over the last week in terms of support for the sector. And so I don't know about you, but I certainly I look forward to this Thursday morning gathering where we can just come together as a community of a variety of actors in the space. I know a lot of you are really anxious to do something about the crisis, and I know sitting at home, you have a little extra time in your hands, although many of us are juggling families and caregiving as well as work, but also caring about wanting to do something, and that's really what this morning is about. So a reminder that we've put the poll up in the left-hand toolbar. It's lit up now. I may have jumped the gun on my team there. But if you would take 2 seconds to say who you are, it's private, but we just want to get a sense of who's in the room. We have already almost 150 folks joining us so far, and we had 227 register. So it take a few seconds there. I'm going to give our speakers their proper dues. We've got JN, Ekua, Shelley, and Bill with us. But first of all, I wanted to just acknowledge the fact that last week we had the pleasure of having Lindsay Kretschmer on from the Toronto Aboriginal Support Services Council. And I think it's important to start today off to acknowledge the fact that Toronto Foundation works gratefully on the lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit. And you know, we learned how vulnerable our urban Indigenous First Peoples are, and how much need there is in that sector. And I think we wouldn't be right to start this conversation without making that acknowledgement. We're 3 weeks in and have been fortunate enough to hear the perspective of many tireless leaders. I want to say that right off the top, because some of the folks you're meeting today have been working really long hours, and the fact that they're joining us at 8 o'clock on Thursday morning to talk about the work, we really appreciate them taking the time and want to respect that time. I also want to thank, as always, Vancity Investment Bank for really being the catalyst for this webinar and coalition work to begin with. JN Guilfoy, who has joined us from Vancouver, and it's like 5 in the morning there, really called us up. They're a partner of ours in other parts of our work, and said, what can we do, and how can we convene, and how can we spark a conversation about philanthropy in the context of this crisis. And so I'm really happy to have Diane back, and would like to ask her to say a few words this morning, if she can join me on the screen.
Can you see me? Can you hear me? Yay! First success of the morning. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see so many people in the room. I was here a couple of weeks ago on the launch of this, and so it's great to see so many more people engage in the conversation. So for those of you who don't know, Vancity Community Investment Bank is Canada's only bank focused on helping organizations who are doing something positive for the world. So our vision is to finance a sustainable tomorrow. And I think up until the last few weeks, we were really defining that in terms of environmental sustainability, affordability, dealing with some of those issues. But now, as we face the crisis that we're currently in, we definitely will look at how do we expand our definition and make sure that we are also thinking about community health, relationships, and all that kind of stuff as we go forward. I would like to thank Sharon for acknowledging the land that many of us are calling in from this morning. I think it's important to acknowledge that our Indigenous communities have been the stewards of this land, and as we deal with a pandemic, it's equally as important to feel that sort of deep sense of connection to places that we live and be grateful for that. So I personally am very grateful for all that the Indigenous communities have done to keep our land in good stead and be the forefathers of our country. And the Toronto Foundation, you know, this is a fabulous event that you guys have been putting together. We are very excited to partner with the Toronto Foundation just over 2 weeks ago. Like, it feels like about 6 months, you know, in terms of days all melding into the other. And today we're even more proud that we have that we've been able to extend our little bit of money into two other community foundations. So we've got a similar thing going on with the Ottawa Community Foundation to fund their COVID-19 Rapid Response Fund, and with the Hamilton Community Foundation to fund their Pandemic Response Fund. So really, you know, community is in the heart of our name as a bank, and we think that these three communities are ones that are very important to us and very important to the folks that live in those communities. In addition to the philanthropic community, I also hope to see other financial institutions participate in these funds, because I believe that we all have a role to play. And I know that there's been a number of other things announced by financial institutions, but I am activating networks that I know of in terms of hoping that others sort of come into this coalition that we're part of. And I'm excited to announce that there has been an anonymous contribution of $50,000 to the Better Toronto Coalition Fund this week. So Sharon and team have been activating that, and it's very exciting. And I'm equally and more excited to announce that Rally Assets, and I note that UPCAR was on a list of people, an impact investment and advisory firm that uses capital as a tool for social and environmental progress. The employees at Rally Asset have come together to donate $25,000 to the Better Toronto Coalition Fund and another $25,000 to the Hamilton Community Foundation Pandemic Response Funds. So they hope this gesture inspires others, and I do too, to donate to foundations or other collective actions that provide immediate support and contribution to the long-term strengthening of community. Thank you to Rally Assets. We really appreciate your support. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Jan, and I echo our gratitude to Rally and the others that are already funding Toronto Foundation's Coalition Fund in partnership with Vancity. The team has been on the phone all week, and you're going to hear a lot more about that work next week. I guess I would only stress that this isn't a traditional fundraising campaign. A lot of what we've been trying to convince funders to do is give directly and unrestricted to the organizations that need it now. But as always, there is often, I'm finding in philanthropy, a desire to pool and to collaborate. And so we have made the Toronto Coalition Fund available as a collaboration tool. If folks want to join us, they would be more than welcome. But we are just as happy and celebrate giving directly to the organizations, either that you hear from today or that you can see introducing themselves in the chat line. These are our family members, and we want to see them all funded. So thank you for that. I did want to acknowledge my team's been texting me to remind me, I've been having some data issues. So if I'm a little blurry or glitchy, my apologies. This is the new world. I may turn my video screen off once I get into the interviews with our friends here. And I'm going to dive into that in a moment. I just want to remind everyone listening that we would love for you to be highlighting your questions in the chat function all through this conversation. The team will be collecting and summarizing those questions for our 20 minutes at the end, where you will have the opportunity to ask questions directly to our speakers. But also, if you have an open question for anyone on the in chat, again, we have a high percentage of fantastic organizations joining us who aren't being profiled, but are doing important work. And so feel free to ask open-ended questions to the room as well. And those org leaders that have the answers or other funders that have answers, dive in with your answers. That's what this is meant to be about. So we're so happy to see the level of connections that are happening, and we want that to continue. That's an important part of this work. I'm going to start with our first and say hello to our first speaker, Ekua Asabea Blair, the CEO of the Massey Centre. Good morning, Ekua. Oh, don't forget to turn your mic back on, Ekua. You're still muted, top.
Hello.
There she is.
Good morning.
I was thanking Ekua very much for wearing the best glasses I have seen in a long time to cheer us this morning. Ekua, can you start by just talking about the Massey Centre and what it does? And we always talk here about the before and then the present. So if you could just give us the before, what the Massey Centre was about, and then you can move into what's happening today.
Thank you, and thanks again for the opportunity to talk about the important work that we're doing at Massey. So we're an infant and early childhood mental health organization providing mental health and education and transitional supports to pregnant and parenting teens who are between the ages of 13 and 25, and their babies who are between 0 to 6. We also provide some early on and childcare services to the broader community of East York. We've also had to, since COVID-19 came in, we had to focus on our essential services. And so what we're doing right now is really offering residential and transitional support on site. And we are also doing some virtual programming just so that, since we're reducing the number of people coming in on site, so we're offering virtual psychotherapy services, as well as we're offering telephone services to many of our community members who are part of our Housing First initiative, where we provide housing for them in the community with subsidized rents. And we're keeping in touch with those families who are living in the community via phone or using virtual technology. So our world has really turned upside down in more ways than one.
What worries you most right now? Like what is truly keeping you awake at night when you think about the most vulnerable in your community of people that you serve?
I think the biggest challenge is the young women. They're homeless. Many of them are isolated. They have no family support. We have a young woman who is a new immigrant to the country, refugee status, 17 years old, 7 months pregnant. And her partner lives in a shelter. And she is worried about going in to have her first child with no one else in the room with her because of COVID-19. And she's also without some essential services. Most of us take having a cell phone for granted. A lot of services are now being offered by phone or virtually, but sometimes there are families that don't have those resources. Right now, she's trying to connect with her family doctor, who is only connecting via phone, and she doesn't have a phone. So we're finding creative ways to help her connect to those services. So I am just worried about these young women who are socially, financially, emotionally challenged, taking on the biggest job in the world, raising another human being, but are without some of the social supports that they need. And sometimes, they're still in their rebellious stages, and so they're challenging the going out. and so we worry about them, and the coronavirus. So that's what's keeping me awake, that I cannot imagine going through something like this without support. So I'm glad that we were able to be listed as an essential service and to remain open and to be able to continue to offer those important supports to young women like this young woman that I'm talking about.
So what could anyone participating today do to help you? What would help look like? What's the best?
Technology is a big piece of it. There are a number of them that are not connected, don't have a TV, don't have a cell phone, don't have a video. And then you wonder how they're keeping connected to the world around them in a difficult time like this. Food access, food security is a huge issue. Those who are on OW, we know that amount never was enough during the good times. And now we're fine, and most grocery stores are asking people to come in and bring in and not use cash. They have to use cards, and a lot of our women are not women who are connected to the system in that way. So even just getting a bank card is a new challenge during this time, where many organizations are asking people not to come in and have face-to-face contact. So food, technology, food access is a huge issue. Technology, diapers, supplies, formulas, those things are important. Unfortunately, we're not accepting any in-kind donations, so any cash donation to us to help us purchase those supplies for the young women would be of great, will fill a huge gap for the young women that we serve.
Thank you, Ekua. We'll come back to you in the end for our group questions, but thank you for the work that you're doing. I can't even imagine the stress just on your team, let alone on your clients. It's crazy. I'm going to move to Bill Sinclair, who's the ED of St. Stephen's Community House. Bill, thank you for joining us today. You're serving a connected but different population these days.
Mm-hmm. So in general, St. Stephen's, which is part of the neighborhood group, we serve all ages over a variety of neighborhoods across the city. On a normal day, our big programs include childcare. We have 10 licensed childcare centers across the city. We provide care for seniors with 3 senior centers, and home care with personal support workers going in to visit about 1,000 seniors every day in their home. We have housing for about 500 low-income tenants who live in our housing, and then homeless services such as a drop-in center, street outreach services, ID clinics, and an overdose prevention site where we are preventing opioid overdoses. We also have 2 employment centers in the east and west, 12 English classes every day, and 6 youth centers supporting teenagers with safe and healthy activities. So we'll see about 50,000 people a year from 30 different locations if this was a normal day. But of course, it's not a normal day right now, and we're really focused on essential services, just like the like Ekua mentioned. In our case, our essential services are, again, care for those seniors who are living at home. We have about 200 staff still face-to-face working with people. Some services we can do through telephone and internet, but those seniors at home need help with bathing, dressing, taking medication, getting care so they can stay in their homes, and that can only be done one-on-one in people's homes, and so we're still doing that. We also are still running our homeless drop-in center, very challenging in these times, but people who have nowhere to go to the washroom, nowhere to shower or get food, are still leading us and coming to us. And at that center, we have our overdose prevention site where we're continuing to help people to prevent overdose. So quite a lot of activity still happening in this crisis for those who can't be served virtually.
Bill, before the call, you were talking about some of the new work you've been doing with the hoteling and isolation. I think the group would be interested in just hearing a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so as we work with people who are homeless, so for example, we only let 30 people in at one time so we can have social distancing in our space. The other day we've had 160 people come, and they had to wait to take their turn to come in to eat and to get care and to meet with staff. But as people are showing symptoms and they go for the test and go to the assessment center, we're working with the healthcare system to place people in isolation while they wait for their test results. And so we have our peer leaders who are supporting people while they're in isolation. And if you've been homeless on the streets or in a shelter for a long period of time, it is very different to go into isolation in a motel room or anywhere, staring at 4 walls after being surrounded by other people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for many long period of time. So we're providing a lot of emotional support to people, both worried about if they have the virus, traumatized by being homeless, and really in a very strange and alien situation of being in isolation. So we have about 20 of our peer leaders who are providing emotional support to people while they wait for their test results.
What is your greatest fear about how this looks over, they've just extended to 12 weeks. This could run through the summer. What really scares you, Bill?
I mean, we're scared of an outbreak, both for our seniors, and of course we've seen some outbreaks start in nursing homes, and we're worried there hasn't been an outbreak in shelters, but an outbreak that would run through a place like a shelter, that would run through a place like a nursing home, is our biggest nightmare that we're facing. Some homeless people are actually staying out on the streets as a self-protection strategy because they are frightened. So we are trying to support people to get health care and to get tested and to get all the care they can get. We do overdose prevention, and we are nervous. There's been a spike in overdoses this week. I've talked to some people, and I've heard of at least 8 overdoses in the last couple of days. One fatal, sadly. The others, people were saved. And of course, people having access to safety and overdose prevention is really vital, and we need to keep our overdose prevention service open, as all of the centers do who are doing this, to avoid this. This is a 2-year tragedy that we're dealing with as far as overdose, and we can't forget that in the situation of this new crisis.
It's been interesting in conversations with org leaders that the crisis itself, you could just call it a health crisis, but it really is amplifying all other crises, it makes it a double or a triple whammy. And I think I want to point out to the folks on the call that, here we are looking at the full spectrum between Ekua's work with infants and young mothers all the way to our seniors. These are some of our most vulnerable folks. With just a short window of time left for you, Bill, what do you need? And is there any opportunity to volunteer for St. Stephen, as well as, I'm sure there's a financial need. I'm positive of that. I think I can say that safely. But is there anything else folks could be doing if they were giving? And
so certainly, especially our overdose prevention site needs funding to stay open every day. And the emotional support of our peer leaders, we've been able to hire and pay them to provide this emotional support. And so that's very helpful. But we're not taking new volunteers right now. We are using our current volunteers who are already trained. But we are welcoming supplies for people who are homeless. They still need food. They still need soap and hygiene supplies and deodorant. We still need towels, and we still need hand sanitizer. Really, for people, there's almost no bathrooms left that are public in the city right now. So homeless people need hand sanitizer to carry on their person. They need bars of soap to carry on their person. They need supplies to stay, to wash their hands, because there are so few places to do that now. So we are still welcoming at our site at 260 Augusta food donations and in-kind donations still. We need masks and gloves and protective personal equipment, but I know that isn't what this audience is about. We're talking to the Ministry of Health about that a care worker can't go into a senior's home and bathe them and care for them without proper equipment to stay safe. And we hope the healthcare system will have enough supply to make sure that every care worker and every senior is protected. For this audience, certainly food and other personal supplies that homeless people could need are still welcome.
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to move now to Shelley Nicholls, who's the Executive Director of Sistering. And she has warned us there may be children in the background, which I love, so I welcome them, but she's told me not to tell them that. They might show up. So Shelley, thanks for joining us. And again, if you could talk to us about the sort of what Sistering used to do, and then what does it look like at Sistering today?
Sure. Thank you for having me here today, Sharon. Yes, there may be small children who will run through here, so thank you for that mention of that. So I've been with Sistering for about 10 months now, and Sistering is a multi-service agency supporting women and trans people who are homeless as well as precariously housed or socially isolated. Sistering's founding principles are based on harm reduction, anti-oppression, anti-racism, trauma-informed, and relationship building. We have a low barrier model that's critical to creating safe and welcome space for all. We also advocate for women who come to Sistering. We lobby for safe, low barrier shelters as well as affordable housing, which is very important to us, affordable housing as well as supportive housing, healthcare, public transportation that is economical and accessible for all women and trans. So until March 13th, we operated 2 drop-ins in Toronto's West End, and we had our 24/7 location on Bloor, which was just a bustling place every day, having lots of our participants come in. Anywhere from 40 to 70 people would come, as well as it would be regular to have 30 volunteers come in, as well as our inner city health associate doctors. It was a place where we made 130,000 meals last year that were prepared in our kitchen. We distributed 95,000 harm reduction kits. We had our social enterprise, Spun Studios, where we had socially isolated seniors and other participants would learn how to sew, to knit, and gather in community. So we would have in our drop-in space, we'd have bingo for our participants, we'd have dances, we'd have yoga, we'd celebrate our community. Just last month, although it feels like a long time ago, we were celebrating Black History Month. And we also served over 3,000 participants last year. So as well as providing housing and case support for our folks who are either precariously housed or housed. So as a 24/7, we were not a shelter. So we had no beds, no cots, nothing like that. And our services were accessed by women and trans folks who were anywhere from 16 to 80. And a lot of times we'd have women who were recently discharged from hospitals, a lot of times without care plans. And we have sex workers. We have women abusing substances and complex mental health. Senior women, we have a wide variety from the Chinese, Caribbean, and Spanish-speaking communities. We have women who are experiencing trauma and violence. Immigrant women, refugee women, women without legal status. So we'd all welcome them into our sistering space. And a significant number of women who were in sistering space were not welcome in other areas, other shelters. They'd been barred or banned from other shelters. So it was a place where we welcomed all and we were supportive of all. March 16th, we had to, I guess this is when COVID really struck, was our community center where we operated one of our drop-ins that was forced to close with very short notice. We were operating as of the Friday before the 13th, but we knew that we had to close at some point, but we didn't think it was going to be closing that weekend. And so that site served a lot of seniors who were either precariously housed or a lot of times they were socially isolated. So sistering to them was a place to gather. And then not having that place was difficult, but we have some amazing outreach team who would be there and we're continuing to support them in the community. Our Bloor Street 24/7 drop-in remained open until March 24th, which was a challenge in the fact that we'd often seen 50 to 60 to 70 women, but we had gradually brought our numbers down starting March 16th, but I believe it was March 20th, or maybe it was March 19th, we had an influx. We had 50 women in the space, women and trans folks in the space, and we were like, where did all these people come from? And a lot of them had been, or some of them had been brought in from other areas outside of Toronto because they knew that, and some were brought in by police officers, they knew that sistering was a safe space that accepted folks without having to do an intake. So that was not a sustainable. We weren't able to have the adequate physical distancing that was required. So we quickly had to work with the City of Toronto and make some changes. And one of the things that we did was we had to open our pandemic response center. So we moved our location in about 36 hours from the Bloor Street location to a Parkdale Community Center. And that was an amazing feat that I will be forever grateful for my amazing team to have done in just that short period of time. But we were able to move a lot of our participants into the space, as well as some of the participants decided to go to hotels that the city has also been offering. So,
So Shelley,
yes.
it's amazing to me to think about an organization that is already dealing with socially isolated individuals,
Mhm.
reworking its whole program to create a socially isolated environment that still connects people. Are you using technology at all, or are you trying to keep things face to face where safely possible?
So we're definitely trying to use technology as much as possible. We do partner. So one of our part of what we do is we had medical staff on site 4 days a week at Sistering through the Intercity Health Associates. And in partnership with them, they were able to help us get some cell phones so that we can distribute to our participants. I'd say a fair majority of our participants do have some access to technology, but I'd say there's still about 30% who, or to 40% that didn't have a cell phone or a tablet or anything like that. So that's really helpful. We're working with TELUS to get those phones online so that way we can offer that support. But it is difficult to have these socially isolated folks who don't have that technology. So we do have a case support team that works directly with folks and is able to give them one-on-one through a safe distance to offer that support, to continue offering that support.
Runa, can you pull everybody up? Because I want to actually turn this into a bigger group conversation, because I'm hearing some themes, I think, between each of these organizations. Thank you. And so the first really quick question I have for each of you is, how long have your organizations existed in this city? Bill, how many years, St. Stephen's?
So St. Stephen's about 60 years, although the neighborhood group is over 100 years old.
Wow. And Ekua, how long has Massey been around? Oh, don't forget to unmute yourself, Ekua. Shelley, you go, and then Ekua can join us.
Sure. So Sistering has been around, it'll be 40 years next year that will be in serving the Greater West Toronto area.
That's amazing. And Ekua, how many years?
Massey has been around for 119 years.
So I just wanted to say that to the room, because a lot of times I hear from funders that they've never heard of the organizations we grant to, and thus how could they possibly trust them? And I think it's really an important reminder that you guys have been in this for the long haul. You aren't startups. You are established critical care institutions. And I think that always surprises people. So I just wanted to ask that question. The second question, so I'm hearing a real theme here. We're using technology to get together on a weekly basis, but clearly one of the biggest barriers to in a social isolation environment is access to technology. I mean, Bill, you had said to me earlier that in these motel room isolation units, the first week, they didn't even have TVs for the homeless folks that are living there. And just being connected, like being able to connect with technology is clearly a gap. And just nod if that's the answer is yes for all of you. Like clearly technologies are really a missing piece for some of our most vulnerable folks. So I think I wanted to just emphasize that. I think, I guess this is probably the conversation I have felt the darkest about so far. And I guess the question I have for each of you is there something that gives you hope through this? Is there something positive coming out of this in any way for your organizations? Maybe Bill, I'll start with you.
I must say the crisis started pretty bleak for us. We were very worried that the response was slow for people who were homeless. Lots of homeless services actually had to close in the first few days because they didn't have equipment, they didn't have support. They weren't even getting they needed instructions as to how they could operate in this new world, the way sistering has and how sistering has adapted. And not everyone can pivot like that and adapt like that. So I think, sistering and St. Stephen's, there's only about 7 or 8 services that are still up and running and pivoting. So I think that's, I think I've gone off topic, but I think that learning to be innovative and adapt is sort of in our DNA amongst the people you have on the call today. And people have been so generous. I mean, people who can give what they can give, and bringing. We had a restaurant bring us 200 sandwiches the other day, so that we could, spend more time helping and less time making food. So people are helping out. All these distilleries who are giving us hand sanitizer, amazing and very much welcomed. And just the Knitting Guild, who's making us a bunch of cloth, masks and things like that. People are doing what they can, and quite an outpouring of love, if not, always what people don't know what to give or how to help, but there's an outpouring of love.
Ekua, how about you?
I think what gives me hope is the fact that even though while we're reaching out to the isolated, there are also people who are connected to us who are reaching out to us, our donors calling, wanting to find out how we are doing. I'm also hopeful about the fact that our staff are still coming in every day and providing care under some really difficult circumstances, and could say very easily, I'm not doing this, but are still committed to the work and to the, the support for the young women and babies that we serve. And I'm also hopeful that, our government is doing, I think, a really good job of, it was good last weekend to hear that there was going to be support to the nonprofit sector, because all along we had heard about corporations or the private sector, and governments, are finally thinking about us and what our needs are, and making sure that our staff can be at work by making the emergency response benefit fund available to make sure that we can continue to open our doors to our clients. So that gives me hope that our community still cares, our staff still cares, our girls are worried about their babies and want to, despite whatever challenges they're facing, want the best for their children. So that gives me hope.
Thank you. Shelley, at Toronto Foundation, we have a whole campaign around women and the unique issues women face in various crises, but there's no question women are also deeply affected by the COVID crisis. How is that playing out for sistering in terms of, dealing with domestic violence and the things that you would see women trying to escape from?
Thank you for that question, Sharon. It is a difficult situation because we have many participants who are, some of them are housed, but they are housed with abusers. And so it makes home not a safe place. So we're doing what we can to ensure that we can support them in giving them the links to the services that they need through either the hoteling program or coming to sistering for a time. But it's a difficult time, and I think more people know that being home isn't always the safest place for women, for children, for a lot of folks. And I think I see a little bit of hope in the fact that there's folks doing more to ensure that people feel safe and they have a safe space to go, and we are one of those safe spaces.
Thank you. Bill, I have a question here about what kind of food donations you're looking for and where that could be sent.
Yeah, so 260 Augusta in Kensington Market, breakfast and lunch. The sandwiches are good, portable things are good. Some people are taking food to go. So it's good, the things that don't have to be like unfortunately, stews are not a good thing right now. Soups are not a good thing right now. because people have to have containers and utensils to eat them. So things that people can carry are helpful. As I say, wonderful bagels and sandwiches and fruit and things that people can eat and take away.
Thank you. There's a question here about someone in the group is suggesting that one of the themes they're seeing is that your client demographics are changing. Is that a fair statement? And I think, Shelley, maybe you had talked about the number of people that showed up one day, but are you seeing, we have all been worried about the fact that 30% of Torontonians were living under the poverty line before this crisis. Mm-hmm. And now people are losing their jobs, and government support aside, are you seeing your demographics change? Does anybody want a hand raise to answer that question? Are your clients changing?
I'd say some of our clients are changing, but I'd say demographic wise, they're skewing more towards older, maybe in 50, 60, 70. And we've been seeing some first-time homeless folks, which is a big change to have been housed for most of your life and then to hit a situation where either there's a mental health issue or there is a funds issue and you're not able to pay your rent, and then you are on the street. So that's been something that we've been seeing for a little bit now. We've been seeing this older demographic coming into the shelter space for the first time.
We have a food bank in the East End, and a big number. It's gone up really quickly, the numbers of people asking for help from the food bank, and I think lots of first-time users and people who haven't needed it before. I think universally, food banks are feeling an enormous pressure. So that's definitely part of it. We have 2 employment centers, as I mentioned, and we're waiting for a tsunami of newly unemployed people. That I think people are in shock right now, and people are in isolation. But the numbers of people claiming EI and other benefits are gigantic, and the people who are going to need employment services in the coming weeks are once they're allowed to come out of their house and come to the employment center, are going to be huge.
So if each of you could tell me then, if we were building our list of risk a month ago, and you're building your list of risks for your organization today, can you tell me how you would revise that list? What is new? What are the new risks you're worried about for each of your organizations?
I would say the risk that we're looking at is space. The fact that our sistering space is fairly tight, our original Bloor Street location, and it's made for about 30 people to be in there, but we have had 60 or 70. So really understanding the whole physical distancing and making sure that people can have space to spread out, that's something that is more, it's higher on the list of some of our risks.
Ekua?
For me, it's the financial risk. I remember in 2008 when the financial markets crashed and how difficult it was for us to fundraise. I think we need at least 10% of our funding to come from donors, individuals, corporations. And if they're struggling, we're gonna feel the pinch. I think governments are trying to just keep our staff employed, but it's it won't meet some of the other needs that we're going to have for the young women. And so that's my biggest worry, because I think we saw what happened in 2008 and how it impacted all our. So that's one thing that would certainly change this.
If I can make a comment there before I let you answer, Bill, I do want to just reinforce again for those on the phone that the big charities, the biggest charities, get most of the donations in this country, right? 66% of all donations in this country go to 1% of the charities. That same group gets 67% of all government funding, okay? And I can speak from lots of experience that those big charities are going to weather the storm. And they're and they are wonderful institutions, but they have endowment funds, they have reserves. And I think one of the reasons we felt so strongly that our first act for this crisis was to convene and give voice to the small organizations is that many of them will collapse through this this crisis, and that they are dependent on donations, and it is a time to rethink your giving strategy. So I cannot stress that enough. I hope I don't sound too preachy, but I just want to do a reality check that the big guys are going to make it. But the little organizations that have been around for decades, as you have learned, the three on this call have been, some of them for century, are the ones that will struggle the most, and they're serving the most vulnerable populations. Bill, your biggest risk that has changed for you?
I think I agree with Shelley earlier that we need to get homeless people into hotels and housing as soon as possible. Shelters are not going to be safe and are a huge risk. And because we care for seniors in their home, we're also preparing for a large number of seniors post-COVID coming out of hospital. So hopefully they will survive, and we need them to survive and come back to their home and to be cared for in their home afterwards. We need to get seniors out of hospital where they could be safer in their home. So I think there's a lot of service adjustments in the next few weeks.
So I guess it may be my last question. We'll see how we answer it. But I always like to give, because you guys are on the ground, you have so many amazing peers that are also working at different organizations. I'd love for each of you to tell us, we all know that we want to support you, but who else needs support? What other organizations would you recommend those on the phone be supporting right now, financially or otherwise? I'd love to give you each a chance to shout outs for some of your peers that aren't here, or maybe in the call but don't have their voices here. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So first of all, I really want to thank you for giving us this platform. And Massey Centre has been around for 119 years, but there are two other organizations doing, I should say three similar organizations doing similar work. You know, pregnant and parenting teens are not on anybody's radar, and yet they're so vulnerable. They're raising the next generation. And if they don't have the appropriate support, the cycle is going to continue for teen pregnancies. The research tells us that. So no government prioritizes the work that we're doing, even though it's so critical to the success of the next generation. So I'd like to shout out my sister organizations that are doing amazing work, who are, need donations just as much as we do. And so that's Humewood House, that's in the West End. And I'd like to shout out Rosalie Hall in Scarborough. And I'll also like to shout out Jess's June Collwood Center that's located in downtown. We're all doing great work and don't have the profile, and I'm happy to promote the important work that they do as well. So that was more than one, Sharon, but
I'm okay with more than one. You can list off as many, because we're trying to create a list for our funders so that they know where to go, and they're getting the endorsement from you guys. So please do. It doesn't have to just. Shelley or Bill?
Sure. Oh, did you want to go, Bill?
You go, Shelley.
I can go. Thank you. So Sistering is partnered with Bill's organization, St. Stephen's, as well as West Neighborhood House and Park. Those we're a foursome in that. And it's been amazing to talk to them, to work with them. We also have a lot of other partnerships with Barbara Schleifer Foundation, which is illegal, which is amazing. Parkdale Queen West, Margaret's, there's Dixon Hall. These are all really great organizations led by some strong leaders that I have so much respect for. And I also am part of the Maitri Policy School for class of 2020. And I'm not sure if it's going to happen still, but if anyone wants to look for more organizations that are looking at poverty reduction, just go to the Main Policy Schools page and you will see some amazing groups. Everything from like Daily Bread, which is a large organization that's serving food, Feed Ontario, Native Child, the Black Health Alliance. These are organizations that are right in it, and I'm just amazed and think that all of them should be getting a little bit more pats on the back and praise.
Thanks. I
Go
would
ahead, Bill.
mention, I would shout out to Street Health, which is an organization working to provide healthcare for people on the streets, and also an overdose prevention site provider, saving people's lives every day in the opioid crisis, and their service is almost entirely funded by donations. They need private donations every day to keep open. I will just mention, though, that as a group, we need to be concerned about childcare. If childcares are closed for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, this is going to devastate the childcare sector unless there's some clear government plan to rescue childcare centers. So no fees for a month, no fees for 2 months will bankrupt so many childcare centers. Thanks.
Boy. So I had a question about the 1% comment I made earlier, and I'll just say, when I'm talking about the top 1% organizations in the country that get the most donations, I'm primarily talking about the big hospitals and academic institutions, private schools, that cohort of all important institutions. I would never tell anyone not to give to their alumni or that they weren't important to our society. But at this time, they are best suited to weather this financial storm, and the organizations we support are not so committed. I want to try an experiment. I didn't talk to the team about this, but on the chat line, we had this incredible experience at an event, which was only a month ago, if you can believe it. There were 300 of us together, side by side, again promoting 10 amazing grassroots organizations in Toronto. But one of the things we did is we asked the audience to give us one word that expresses how they're feeling right now. And I'd love the chat line to light up with those words. Could folks tell us one word that describes where they are right now, and start putting them in the chat? And then I would ask our speakers as my last question, what your one word in terms of how you're feeling. And I'm not suggesting it has to be an inspiring or positive word, but I'd like to know from each of you, what is the one word that might sum up how you're feeling today?
Hmm. If I'm honest, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, that's a common word.
It's the first time in our history where you're concerned at home, so every aspect of your life is affected by this. And so there's no safe place. It feels like sometimes that there's no safe place. This virus is invisible and it's everywhere, and fearful and exhausted by all that you need to do to keep yourself safe. And so, yeah, it's taking a toll for sure. And it's hard when you have to do this and manage and be that compassionate and empathetic leader, and to support others that need support, because I see my staff and they're brave, but I see how frail and worried for the first time, because it's our lives that are all at stake, the lives of ourselves and the lives of the clients that don't have as much as we have, and we wish we could do more. So I'm sorry, I'm so emotional, and that's
No, you've worked me up into a froth over here, because I'm with you. I often feel guilty at the privilege that we have, but I also am feeling the same feelings you are around the worry for my team and for my family. And Bill, Shelley, where are you on this?
I got the benefit of seeing the chat words, and I saw determined, which I love. And I think we are all determined here, and doing what needs to get done, and very quickly, in a very quick turnaround.
I would say also grateful and would be something because we are seeing so many people supporting us, and it's given a energy to the team in a way that because a lot of my team has had 16-hour days, 18-hour days, not going home, just to make sure that we have the space, we have that. I feel grateful for them, and I feel like we're gonna get through this. And I can't remember the saying. Basically, like, we're in hell right now, but don't stop, keep going. Let's keep moving. We're gonna get through this, and I feel really inspired in a way because I just this morning I woke up and I got an email from a person who lives in the neighborhood of Sistering, and they had started doing flowers. They started drawing flowers every day for COVID, and they've decided that these drawings, they put them they've made it a fundraiser, and it's raised already over, I believe, $400. And it's just like, there's so much going on, but I'm really grateful for these people to be there to say, hey, don't stop, keep going. We're here for you. It's not a great time, but we're here for you, and we will help support you. So I'm also a little verklempt, but I'm very grateful for that.
And I can't think of a better way to wrap up our conversation this morning with gratitude to the incredible strength it takes to be who you are and to lead what you're leading and do what you're doing, and how humbling it is, I think, for all of us to understand your challenges. And I can only repeat to our audience, please, please be generous at this time, whether with your time or your network or your influence or your money. We need you. The sector needs you, and the folks that we've been talking about today need you, and these leaders need you. We will wrap this up today, sadly and gratefully, and look forward, I hope, to seeing many of you join us next week. And you'll be receiving your follow-up email. Check out torontofoundation.ca for the list of all the organizations that were mentioned today. This has been recorded, so if you have someone in your life that you think would benefit from watching these amazing leaders talk about their work, please do share. Please invite them to join us next week. And I ask you all to stay safe, to stay healthy, and stay connected. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.